Okay. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on when you're joining us and where in the world you're joining us from. And welcome to another event with our Solo Traveler Insiders. And today's speaker is Bree Woolard. And so I'd like to introduce you to her. And she has graciously agreed to join us tonight and talk about how she took a leap of faith and left her job and went on a solo trip that transformed her life. Bree has a passion for empowering individuals to transform their lives in positive ways. After starting a fitness account on Instagram in 2017, Bree has now also taken TikTok by storm, where she inspires her almost 40,000 followers there with her lifestyle-focused content, which includes travel, fitness, relationships, and mindset. And as I already mentioned, she recently quit her corporate job and embarked on a journey of fulfillment and self-discovery that included her first solo trip to Thailand for 2 months. So I'd like to welcome a young woman who has shown incredible courage and wisdom. Hello, Bree, and welcome to our event.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I don't need to say anything. You covered it
There you
all.
go. Yeah. So, I'm sure everyone is eager to hear from you. So let's just dive into our first question. And as I already mentioned to the audience prior to this, if you do have any questions, just pop them into the room chat and we will ask them of Bree when we get a chance. And so Bree, so let's start with the first question. Your life went through quite a transformation in the last year, to say the least. Could you briefly tell us about how you ended up going on the solo trip to Thailand early this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you touched on in the intro there, so I was in a big four corporate job before I made the jump to travel and start this new chapter. I actually rewinding a little bit before that, I went to business school. I was at Western University, and I followed the path. I just followed, what felt like the respected and common path to take. So I was a business analyst at Deloitte in HR consulting, starting in January 2021. So I think just a lot, about this role. It just really wasn't working for me. So I was, to be fair, I was also in my studio apartment here in Toronto. Not a lot was going on, so I didn't really know. There was a lot that prompted this decision for me. But it was in November that I had to take a hard look at my life and see, just ask myself, am I really happy with how things are going? Am I happy waking up and doing this job every day? Is this something I can see myself doing in the future? Maybe, like I said, it might have been a little bit of the pandemic restrictions impacting the experience. Maybe it was just Canadian winter affecting me. I'm not sure. But I just felt like I wasn't showing up as myself and I wasn't really living a routine or a career that was true to who I am. So I made my decision to travel just after I made my decision to leave the job. At the time, I thought, I don't really want to start a new full-time role. I don't know what I'm passionate about. And instead of just jumping right into the next thing, I want to just take a bit of a mind break. And my trip was going to start in Europe. I talked about this a little bit in my blog there. But I just had to switch gears to Thailand because of the pandemic. I just adapted and did what I needed to do. And yeah, so I think we'll dive into this more today, but in my 20s, I just really I want to travel. I want to see the world. And Thailand was a really big eye opener to that. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get more into it, but that's the basics.
For sure. Amazing. I actually, I mean, I knew a little bit about your past already, but I didn't actually realize you were a business analyst. And the reason that, and I think I told you before, where your story kind of resonated with me a bit because I had done something similar where I quit my job and just moved to, and in my case, it was England. But I was also a business analyst and I was working for one of the big five banks here. So we won't get into that, but that just cracked me up when you said that just, to me, that just that amused me quite a bit.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yes, all right, we will. So yeah, no, that's great. And once again, it's you touched on this in your profile article, but could you share again for those who may not have seen it how your family and friends reacted when you told them that you had left your stable job and were going to go solo traveling for 2 months on the other side of the world, because it's a very normal reaction for people to kind of wonder, has she lost her mind? Like, is it a good idea? What's going? And I mean, and especially for anyone that's thinking of doing this, to prepare them as well on for the reactions they're going to get and for how to deal with some of those reactions.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's not your daily news of like, oh, I got a bagel today. It's like, oh, I'm literally going to the other side of the world. So I think it comes down to two parts, right? It's the decision of the job and the decision to go traveling. And I think, and I talked about this a little bit in the article, that my friends were generally pretty supportive. I think this can sometimes come down to, your friends just always want the best for you, and they may not be. They might say, "Oh, be safe," but I think when it comes to parents or family, that's more the people who really want to make sure you're safe. And so I had to remind myself of that whenever they were asking me questions, and sometimes holding me back from going, and asking me those really kind of interrogation questions of, have you thought about this scenario, have you thought about the weather, have you thought about XYZ. And it's stressful when you hear these things, because you're already thinking through them and you're already nervous yourself, but then to have your loved ones ask these questions for you, you start to question, is this really the right choice? So I'd say my friends were generally pretty supportive. My family were the ones who asked a few more questions. And so when it came to the job, I'd say, of course, my parents, they really helped to kind of put me through university, which I'm very grateful for. And I think they were expecting I kind of just carry that through and see it through to the end. But after the 1 year, I just knew it wasn't for me. And I think it just comes with time, and talking to them and saying, like, this is just not what I was hoping for, not what I was wanting. And they do want the best for you at the end of the day. So once you get past that first hump of saying, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what's going to make me happy, that's the first step. When it comes to safety and travel, like I said, it's acknowledging they really just want to make sure you're safe. But how I would respond in these situations is just very matter of factly. I'd say, yes, I have thought through these pieces you brought up, and this is how I'm going to tackle it. This is how I'm going to be proactive to make sure I can stay safe in this situation. So that's all I have to say about when these situations come up. It's just having that research done and being proactive and saying, I have thought through these things. And just knowing that you're making this decision because it's right for you, and it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks. Even if it's family, you got to do at the end of the day what is best for you, even if it's as crazy as something like I did.
For sure. I mean, anyone that cares about you, they just want to make sure you've thought it through. They want to make sure you're not
Exactly.
making an impulsive decision. But as long as you can show that I thought this out, I have a plan. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But did you also find, was there a difference? Is it maybe an age difference as well? Like maybe people that were in the younger generation were more accepting of it, but if they're a little bit older, they might be just because it wasn't something that is accepted. Like nowadays, I feel it's a little bit more common, or not common, but it happens more often that someone younger will just will decide to embark on an adventure like this. Whereas, a few decades ago, it really wasn't something that was as accepted. Like even solo travel. I mean, when Janice started this blog, just over 10 years ago, it still was something that was emerging, and it was still something that wasn't as accepted. So do you think some of that could have played into it as well?
Definitely, definitely. I think, just hearing my mom say things like, I didn't do this when I was a kid, or I would have never. And you're like, okay, well, you're right. It really has matured a lot. The solo travel industry, like even in Thailand, I noticed like the backpacking community of all ages were there. Like it's really taken off in several more countries than just Thailand. But I think that's a big part of it. And that's just coming back down, to earth, and saying like, this is just what's right for me, even if I'm getting all these different opinions. It's taking a hard look and putting the blinders on and looking at your life and thinking, is this something that I want to do, even if I have these different perspectives, because everyone sees the world through their own lens. And you're right. I think the different generations will have different views on what is best for them. Sometimes it is just picking up and packing a bag and leaving, and if that's what it is, and that's what it is, for
For
sure.
sure. And as you said, you have to, you take their, you people you care about, you take their opinions into consideration, but ultimately you do have to remember that you have to do what's best for you, because you're the one that's living your life, so that's most important. Um, and quitting your job is, I mean, obviously a big decision, no matter where you are in your career. But we definitely, as I alluded to, we see it happen to people usually later in life rather than earlier. What would you say gave you the confidence to do it this early in your career, rather than sort of tough it out and decide that maybe this is what I should do. I should give it a little bit more time. So what gave you the courage to actually make that decision?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, as the days went by, I was just trying to motivate myself to get in front of my laptop and just do this 9 to 5 that I just didn't love. I just felt like the confidence came from thinking that I was wasting time. I just thought, you know, the days keep passing and I just felt like I didn't want to spend another day doing something that, even though it was very early in my career and I had seen it out through the year and I had colleagues say, give it a year, give it time. And I gave it the time and I just felt like there's something else, there's something more. And I just didn't want to waste another day, showing up for something that I just didn't feel like I was bringing my true self to. Also talking to people who have done it before. I think at the end of this call, if there's anything you take away, I'm going to keep saying this, like, just talk to people, talk to people. But that's, you're taking the first step by coming to this call. But I think talking to people and who've like almost as a mentor, someone who's done it before, it gives you a sense of relief first, knowing like it's not crazy and people have done this before and they also have been there before, so they have that tangible advice to help you. So I mean, coming from my perspective, I'm saying all that I can say about my experience, but getting, if they're going into an industry that you specifically want to go into, or they're at a similar stage as you, I think just connecting with your network and asking like, how did you get through this, kind of thing is really, really helpful. So you never have to go through stuff alone. It feels very personal, but I think just reaching out and building that support network is huge also.
And I love that you touched on that, because that leads perfectly to my next question, was just that, was there anyone who was invaluable in providing guidance and advice to you in making this decision? And if yes, and I'm sure there obviously were, as you said, what were some of the pieces of advice or guidance that you found the most helpful and most inspirational?
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, when I brought this up to my parents, they were a little bit resistant at first. So I actually didn't turn to them for everything. I have one of my best friends, Jessica. She really helped me because she'd done the exact same trip. So she went to Thailand for a year. She was
Wow.
18. She did it for a year. And this maybe isn't as deep of an answer as you'd like, but she really just gave me a solid packing list. Like it was, here's a huge list of everything you're going to need.
That's
And
important.
yeah, it was things that I would have never thought, like a flashlight, the certain type of bug spray you need down there, a money pouch, solid shampoo and conditioner because you can't, like, to just save on the space and the liquids. And she also gave me a really solid tip for any kind of solo travel and travel where you need to bring a backpack. She said, go with your backpack 75% full so that you have room for souvenirs and clothes and whatnot. I was like, I would have never thought of that. So I think, again, talking to people. So talk to people who have done like the same trip you want to do or a similar kind of adventure. There's also everything on YouTube. We have all this information at our fingertips, but yeah, just having someone to give you a solid packing list of what you're going to need based on that location is really key.
For sure. And I mean, as you mentioned earlier, just with the amount of information that's available online and out there, even if you don't have anyone that you can, that can give you advice, there's information out there somewhere
Yeah.
somewhere on YouTube. Someone has gone through this, or on the solotravelerworld.com blog, which I, just in case, of course, everyone here knows about it. And I mean, it just, exactly, there's no reason, there's no question that can't be answered to some degree. So that's absolutely fantastic. Um, and so what were some of the factors or signs that allowed you to realize that the situation at your work just wasn't something you could push through, and that you need to make a drastic change in your life? Because as you said, a lot of people just told you, you know what, give it another year or give it a little bit more time. But, because it is a big, big decision to make, to leave this job that, as you said, on paper fit the plan of what everyone expects, and it really is hard to walk away from, so much stability. And so, because I remember when one of the first things I thought when I left for England was, I realized, I'm like, okay, I used to deal with multi-million-dollar IT projects, and now I live in a hostel. and I'm like, what just happened? Did I make the right decision? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on here? So I mean, so yes, what were some of the things that that sort of made you realize that, okay, you know what, I need to make this change. It's not, it might not be the most responsible thing on paper, but it is the right decision.
Yeah, definitely. And your stories, it's funny, but it's so bang on. Like I felt the same things this year when I started. TikTok was like starting to pay my bills. It's like, what's going on? So we'll get into that too. But it's no, you know what? I really go by feeling. I think if I'm, whether it's on a date, whether it's like with my job, I go by feeling. I said, am I really into this? And like, am I feeling what I should be right now? And when it comes to the job, it was, am I waking up excited? Am I waking up excited to do this? I'm sure you've probably heard this before. I see some nods. But that really is what it comes down to. And the specific sign that I was noticing was I had work and I had my passion. So work was obviously my 9 to 5. It was my consulting role. My passion was video editing. I would wake up at 5 a.m. to do my video editing. I thought I love being on camera. I love
I
performing.
don't think I've ever heard anyone say they love video editing that much.
It's just, since I was young, I just loved, I don't know what it is. I just love like thinking of a storyline and putting it together. And luckily with
Okay.
the world we live in on social media, this is a really big, it's a really big industry right now. And it just happens to be something I genuinely enjoy. And so like that was the sign for me, was my passion and work were separate and I wanted it to be one. And so, I was like counting down the minutes when I was at my 9 to 5 to switch gears to go to my content. And that was a really big indicator of like, okay, if you're passionate about something too, if you're really passionate, and that shows, and then money follows as a result of that. And I saw that with my own eyes this summer. So that was a really big kind of red flag going off for me.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, although the next thing I was going to wonder was whether or not there was anything at your job that they could have changed, or anything that could have been different that would have made you stay. But it sounds like it might not have been the case, unless they needed. I mean, unless, well, I'll let you answer that. Like, was there anything there that could have changed, or if anything that they were just unable to change, or it was just the nature of the role?
Yeah, definitely. So it's interesting. This is a whole different kind of module of conversation. I think at the kind of company, the size of company that I was at, it felt like, you're coming out of university, you have all these ideas, you really just want to get involved. I think more so like, maybe it's again going back to generational things. I think coming out of university at the time I did, it's just they really teach us that, here's a business, here's a strategy for it, now go into the world. And then it's like we're editing appendices that no one's ever going to see. It's like, well, where am I going to use this knowledge? And I'm not joking, actually. That was kind of what I was doing as an analyst. But I learned over time that it is, you have to learn the basics, you have to learn the foundation. But I think with this company, they had so much red tape that they really just weren't willing to pull off. I just wanted to get involved. I wanted to get in front of the client, and I just felt like my potential wasn't being realized, and I wanted to share that somewhere else. So now, actually, you didn't really ask this, but just skipping ahead, like into the fall, I'm moving actually to Calgary, into a role that I might have a little bit more autonomy. I think my generation and it depends on your personality too. Like some people just want more autonomy and want more responsibility, and that wasn't realized in my year of work there. So I think I did voice these things in the most constructive way possible, but I think it's like a bank. It's a big clunky business that just really has a hard time keeping up with the times. And I wonder if it'll change, but as of right now, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, it's really difficult with such a large company. There's so much bureaucracy in place, and so to make change, they never pivot quickly, as I've also experienced as well. So it definitely is very difficult. And I mean, while they might try, there's only so much they can do, because there's just so many levels of approvals you have to go through for everything, that it's next to impossible. And I mean, they're very risk averse as well too in that industry as well. So completely understandable. And but good on you for so realizing that and stepping away from it. And as we've, I'm sure everyone has noticed, you have a streak of independence about you, and confidence. But is that something you always had, or is it something that you developed more as you grew up? And sorry, is that something have you always just been very independent, or was it something that sort of evolved as you grew up?
Yeah, I think I always kind of have been a little bit bold, a little bit independent. Like I never really feared do my own thing. And so it does kind of come from personality, but I think it's also a muscle that can be worked for sure. When I was at home, I was keen to move away and have my own space and my own itinerary. So that kind of also prompted the solo travel, and how it was a little bit maybe easier. But yeah, I think if I could give advice, like sticking with the topic of solo travel, I understand like it's not as easy as, I just literally pressed the button on book flight and I processed it afterwards. Like I just kind of went for it. But I think if it's, something that you're thinking about, but a little bit nervous to do, I would just always say start small. Like this independence is a muscle that can be worked, and this confidence to do something like this is, it can be built over time. And I'd say just like start by going to a winery for a weekend by yourself, and then maybe do a weekend trip by yourself, and then build up to that week long, whatever, where you get on a plane, and then do the big long haul. So yeah, I think that, I don't know if this is going off topic to the question, but just trying to keep in the topic of solo travel as well. Like I think it definitely can be built up over time, in kind of stages, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And actually, so let's get into your Thailand portion of your adventure here. And could you sort of give us an idea of about how much you budgeted for your trip to Thailand, and also sort of what you would suggest as like a daily minimum or weekly sort of budget for someone thinking of going to Thailand?
Definitely, yes. And I did I put a lot of thought into this before this call, because I was like, last thing I want to do is be crunching numbers and doing mental math at this hour. So, I looked back at, so flights excluded, so not including flights, which were about 1,600 Canadian round trip. And I'm always going to be speaking in Canadian. Just that's just where I purchased them from. So I budgeted, and I'm going to say what the bare minimum is, and then also expand on what it can get up to if you like more, different experiences.
Sure.
So stay with me. It's a lot of numbers coming at you. So without the flight, I spent about, I want to say, a range of 3,000 to 3,500 Canadian total. And I was there for 2 months, just under 2 months. So this breaks down to, about 1,500 a month. Weekly, I'm again, very kind of like ballparking clean numbers. I'd say weekly, it's around 400 a week. Again, this isn't perfect math, but it's just for the sake of the call.
That's fine.
A day, I would say minimum, it comes down to about $55 to $60 a day. This is if you're buying every meal out. You're sticking to maybe street food or cheaper meals, like you're not getting a bunch of drinks or unique experiences. But that being said, it can, I'd say the range, when you think about that initial 3,000 is the minimum, the maximum is about 5,000 for the 2 months there. Does that make sense? That was a lot of numbers.
Sure. And would you say you were like really conscious with your budget? Like with the numbers that you're giving, is that someone who's being really sort of careful and tight with their budget? Or is that someone, who is, not going crazy, but, still having a good time?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the last thing you said is exactly it. I had friends I bumped into at hostels who would have like a written out daily budget. I do this here in Canada, like on my weekly budgets. But when I was traveling, I just thought if my friends want to go into the massage, massages are a big thing in Thailand. Just like an $8 massage. You just, it's like, I want to be able to go do that. And so at the start, I'd say I was a little more flexible. The challenge with Thailand is because things are so cheap, like a pad thai would be like $1, like it'd be $1 for a whole meal. Sometimes a accommodation was $10. So when things are cheaper, it's easier to spend that easier. So I think having a budget is a good idea, having a daily budget, but giving a plus or minus in case you do want to just, go on that tour, or in case you want to get a few more drinks that night. I think it's good to have a plus or minus always.
For sure. And I understand you were able to do a little bit of work while you were there as well. Can you tell us about some of the work that you managed to do while you were in Thailand?
Yeah, definitely. So for the first, I'd say 80% of my trip, I was just there for fun. I was there for leisure. I was posting on social media though. So that was, again, a hobby at the time. And that was, I considered it work. I wanted to make it my future job. But at the end of my trip, I thought I always loved teaching. I loved, working with kids and teaching, and there are lots of opportunities over there for that. So it's just for very spark notes, I'll keep this to the point, just simply what I did. I actually met up with it was a friend of a friend in Thailand who works as a teacher. She's a full-time teacher there. She moved from California and started a new life in Thailand. And she knew someone who has a tutoring company. And so I ended up this is also something that's really easy to do remote from anywhere in the world. I'm teaching students today in Toronto who are on the other side of the world in Thailand. I'm still doing this. So that's something that's great, is this online tutoring. There's lots of opportunities for that. And so that's what I was doing at the later part of my trip. I got involved with this tutoring company, and I would teach kids. It was different subjects. It wasn't necessarily just English. I was teaching business and video editing, of all things. It was it's a really
Perfect.
unique company. Yeah. And so that is what I was doing near the end of my trip. And then I kind of just extended it remotely.
Nice. And do you know if these, because you had mentioned that you found that opportunity through like a friend of a friend, do you know, like, are these opportunities readily available, just advertised, whether in Thailand or somewhere else? Or so if anyone was looking for them, they'd be able to track them down easily?
Definitely. I think it's a lot easier than you think to walk into Thailand and have a 12-month teaching contract within a week. I actually was offered one. It's basically,
Oh, wow.
you know, there's a lot of schools there that really that value and are always kind of looking for either American or British speaking. That was like
Right.
the area I was in. That's what they were
Right.
looking for. But just English as a first language is really what they're looking for. And yeah, if you're willing to set up camp and just be in Thailand, that's a more in
Yes.
person. So that's where the caveat is you have to like commit to that for
Mhm.
a year. I almost did that. I might have been in Thailand at this point giving this call as a teacher, but I just wasn't quite ready for it.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I think, you know, again, it's talking to people, getting on LinkedIn, just searching up. There's lots of opportunities. I say they're very readily available.
Amazing. And I'm assuming they'll set up all the work visas or whatever if there is one required, uh, if that
Yeah,
comes through.
yeah. I don't think the process isn't overly complicated. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to give too many detailed you know, directions on this call. But I think there is a 1-year non-immigrant visa you can apply for. And then you can also set up a Thai bank account. And it's fairly straightforward, actually. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. And
Can I pop in with a question,
yeah,
King?
go ahead.
Bernadette is wondering, do a lot of people speak English in Thailand? And did you have any trouble initially with, was there a big language barrier for you?
Definitely. So that's a great question. I'd say 95% of the time I did not have an issue. A lot of Thailand's a lot of Thailand's economy is built on tourism. So they have English a lot in a lot of the primarily touristy areas, which is the majority of, like, anywhere that you kind of would, you know, like the islands and up north of Chiang Mai. English it's always there. Very fortunate to have had that. But there were sometimes just a few, you know, where we'd go. I was on a group tour and we would go to kind of more of a local a local town. That's when I remember an experience. There was no English on menus. It was like looking at the photos, like, I think this is noodles. I think just your favorite, like, the whatever food. So that was when it was, you know, but very, very rarely I had trouble with the language barrier. The airport, everything, getting to the hotel, it's all very easy to navigate that way. Yeah.
Great. And Janice is curious about what kind of compensation you would earn for teaching in Thailand. Is it enough? Can you support yourself on that?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. Also, this is an interesting one because I actually had to. I did have to look for more full-time work to support myself, because just as, you know, as it is when we go over there, it's very affordable to live. It's the what am I trying to say? It's hard when you come home and you have to kind of live off that wage. So if you're in Thailand, however, if you live in Thailand and you're earning the wage and you're spending, you know, you're working kind of within their economy, I think it is definitely doable. For example, the teachers there who are earning that full-time teacher salary are in a home, like a 2-bedroom, beautiful home, for about $400 US a month. So it's very affordable to live there. But when you bring it back home, I was having troubles. I'm happy to speak about my earnings as a tutor, especially as like tutoring. You can also kind of set your own. You can work with a company. I'd recommend work with a company to maybe set your own rates based on experience. But mine got up to about 25, 26 Canadian an hour, which is pretty good. And so I was able to live off that, but it just wasn't the hours that I needed. So long story short, it's easier to work there when you live there. Bringing it back to the Western world anyways is a little bit hard to manage with the currency. Sorry, long-winded answer.
Oh, that was great.
Sorry, is there any more? No, so the next thing I was wondering is just about getting around in the country. Like, was it easy to get around? Did you have to rent a car, or and also, was safety like ever a big concern for you while you're over there? I mean, obviously you'll take the regular precautions, but was there anything extra that you felt like you need to do?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of getting around, very straightforward. I actually walked a lot. Like where I was, you can kind of walk between the islands. I was up to like 30,000 steps a day, which was great.
Nice.
Great for the activity portion. But yeah, I think I never had to rent a car, but a big thing over there are the scooters. So they have these
Mm.
little electric, or they're, yeah, motorbikes essentially. So that's one option. I'll get into that. Maybe I should say that for more of the safety, the safety part of this question. But you know, one of the ways that you get around is these little, they're called tuk-tuks, like they're basically Thailand taxis. You can just jump in. You really got to be careful because they can charge you more than it should cost. So it's always about kind of negotiating and bringing it back down. That's something I had to watch out for. And then they also have a version of Uber called Grab. So this is it's basically, they wouldn't ever really bring up, they do surge, but they wouldn't kind of they wouldn't try to scam you, because that is something to watch out for in Thailand is these kind of fraudulent scams, whatever. But those are two ways you can get around. And then the scooter. So I was on a scooter. That is a safety concern you have to watch out for. I would not recommend getting on one of those scooters. A lot of tourists are, you know, accidents are common over there if you don't take those necessary precautions. I was okay. I started out on more of a country road. Like you kind of start in the start on a introductory road before getting onto some of the main roads. And if that's something you just don't want to do, cars and that Grab system and the Thailand kind of taxis are the way to go.
Nice.
And
Yeah,
then sorry, by safety, I can also speak to like solo traveling, like safety particularly as a woman, and like what to do kind of around that, if that's something, you know, the audience would want to hear as well. I just want to pause.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything like, I mean, if there's anything specific that you did while you're there, like, I mean, probably generally some of it would be applicable no matter where you are. But yeah, why not touch on some of the sort of precautions that you took while you were there, just to make sure that you were safe.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just speaking to Thailand for a moment, like I actually moved around a lot, and I don't think there was a single moment I felt unsafe. At the start, when I was getting in my taxi going, of course you have those emotions of like, I'm on the other side of the world, what am I doing? But I never felt like I was in danger. My biggest advice for this is just to act the same way you would at home. So when I wouldn't walk around the streets at night alone in Toronto. So just don't do those things wherever you are. You know, don't leave your drink unattended. Like there's a lot of things you just need to carry those same habits with you while solo traveling. And the local in Thailand, like everyone's extremely sweet and they want the best experience for you. I also started my trip with a tour group. I think this is a great way to kind of ease into it, is going places with a group, and they'll also, the tour guides can also give you that advice on, you know, how to take those extra precautions to be safe and where the best places are. But yeah, physical safety, I have a note here, just if you get on a motorbike, don't go too fast and just start in a less busy area. So yeah, that's it for safety.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've touched on quite often here too, is just reminding people, just don't act just act the same way you would in your regular life, and you know, usually you're probably fine. But sorry, Trace, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, actually, Karen was just saying that she lived in Thailand twice as an expat between the ages of 25 and 30. And she's so impressed with Bree that she went solo because the culture is so different and there's so much to learn. And she's curious to know whether you plan to do it again and what country you would like to go to. And was there another country your fellow travelers recommended for long-term travel?
Definitely. Well, that's first of all very interesting, and thank you. It was a scary adventure, but absolutely it opened my eyes to going back and to traveling more. So I would. There was one island I wanted to see in Thailand. It was Koh Tao. It's like the best diving spot in the world, one of the top. And I didn't get there because of budget and time, but I do want to go back to Thailand. I would definitely do it again. And I think if I were to do it, I would go with a little bit more of a budget to do Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Bali, and try to do, that's kind of, if, you know, if we're coming from a Western side of the world, if you come over, you know, it's a 30-hour flight. So to get over there, it's a bit of a long haul. And I think if you were to do it for the first time, I would recommend doing that, because that's some of my friends who I met while traveling had those places and planned out. And it just sounds like a really cool experience also. Southeast Asia. And then also, I think we were going to get into this on this call as well, but Europe, I was actually going to go to Europe before I shifted gears to Thailand, thanks to COVID. But yeah, Europe all over, like starting in Amsterdam. And I would actually probably live over there for about a year. I have so many places I want to go. I think Europe and then New Zealand. I just love nature and I love being outside. And I think those, anywhere that can offer, and also warmer weather, get me out of Canadian winter, please. That is good for me. So yeah.
That's interesting. You want to get out of Canadian winter, and yet you're moving to Calgary.
I don't know what I'm doing. It'll be a unique experience. Maybe you'll see me back in Toronto soon.
Lindsay is curious about what you did for accommodation when you were in Thailand, whether you were did you have an apartment, or were you staying in hostels or hotels?
Definitely, yeah. So when I went to Thailand February. I flew in, so beginning of February. Restrictions were still hanging around. The quarantine, I know these words can be triggering, I'm sorry, but they were still hanging around, and I had to really be mindful of them. And I actually had to stay in a certified hotel for my first 7 days. It was very nice, and I think it was actually a nice way to get into the experience. And then I wanted to spread my wings and get into the hostels. So I think hostels, meeting people, and that's really how you meet people, and how you kind of build a little community, and have the full experience. So I did a mix of hotels and hostels. I'd say majority was hostels. By the end of it, actually I had all three experiences. So I had a hotel. Then I hosteled for a bit. So it's just, you go on, Hostel World is an app I would definitely recommend. You can see ratings, reviews, and book right there. Not like affiliated or sponsored or anything. It's just what I use. And so that was really good. And then, you reach a point where you want to get back into a hotel. So I had a few nights where I just treated myself to a hotel. And then I actually stayed in that home. So I was staying with the teacher's home I was talking about, in like a neighborhood in Chiang Mai, and I kind of got to see what it was really like to live there. And like I said, you can live pretty well you can live in a nice home for fairly inexpensively. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Nice. And go ahead, Tracy.
No, I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Nice. And actually, out of curiosity, just because you had all three of those experiences, which would you say was your favorite, or did it depend on your mood, or yeah, which would you, if you could choose one of them, forgetting cost, which one would you select again if you did it again?
I'm gonna sound like a bit of a princess here, but I did appreciate the hotels. I think when so much is so foreign, like when you go outside and you're just constantly sweating, and you're eating like this hot soup and there's bugs all over you. Amazing experience, but sometimes you just want to go into like an air-conditioned hotel room.
Sure.
I think the hostels are an amazing experience, but the one thing about the hostels that was a little bit challenging was I remember I stayed in a hostel for $6 a night. So I was sharing a bathroom with 14 guys. That was a challenging experience. And the shower was actually in the bathroom. So it was like all one.
Right. That
one was tough. And I think after that, I wanted to get back into people are coming in at different times. Lights are going on. Mm-hmm. It's loud. You just want a hotel. So I think I do like hotels. And then with my living with my friends, it just felt a little bit too, like it was in a neighborhood, like it was out of the way. I didn't really feel like a traveler at that point. I felt like I was kind of living there. So yeah, that's what I'd say. I like having that kind of comfortable end to the day. Yeah. Nice.
No, I totally understand. Especially when it's really, really, I don't necessarily deal with the heat very well, so air conditioning is absolutely fantastic sometimes. Mm-hmm. Although it's just strange, once again, that I spend so much time in Florida, considering how much I don't like the heat. But that's another story. Tracy, do we have another question?
Yeah, Terry is curious about, because at the beginning you talked about your love for video editing, and so Terry is wondering, will you incorporate videos and editing into your travels going forward?
That's a great question. Thank you for the idea. Yeah, I think, it's always going to be a part of my life now. So I saw what can happen. Like, so I've been working with brands this year, and that is my end goal. Like, I'm going back to a 9 to 5 in Calgary. Different industry, different whatever, but I think I will always be editing videos. I make videos of my meals I make videos of my workouts, and I would definitely, maybe have a travel aspect to that once I can kind of build up a little more savings and a little more budget to do it again. But definitely stay tuned. I'm sure you'll see my my handles after this, and stay tuned for the video editing content coming up. So or sorry, the travel content. I think that's definitely something I will be doing in the future for sure.
Great. And I have another question from Karen, who now this is a question we could ask anyone. What would you do differently on your next solo trip?
Oh, I didn't have time to think this one through. I would plan less. I would just plan less. I think I'm very type A. I love lists. I have like lists, and at my desk I have checklists all around me. But I think when it comes to solo travel, like, you'll bump into someone at the hostel, you'll bump into someone at the restaurant, and they'll say, do you want to go snorkeling tomorrow? And you're like, oh, I booked this thing, but that could be a really cool experience. So I would say definitely plan your like long haul flights if you have a date. I actually ended up moving those too. I moved those like 5 weeks, my trip back to Canada. But I think plan less, just have like a few key places you want to go to, but have no structured dates in mind. It's a hard way to live if you're really used to kind of organizing and planning, but it's so freeing also. Like, little side story if I can. That happened. I had a snorkeling trip planned, and then I bumped into a South African. We're on this island, and he goes, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And he's a videographer, so they're actually filming. This guy makes commercials for F1. Like, he's a pretty
Oh, wow.
big deal. And they were filming. Actually, I think we were going to get into this of like influential people I met on the trip, and this guy said, "Well, do you want to come on set with us to film this TV show that's going to be on national TV in South Africa, and as like a big YouTube channel? It's a pretty big deal." And I was like, oh, and so I canceled the snorkeling trip, and I actually ended up I'm now in this South African TV show. So stay tuned for that also. That'll be posted. But I was interviewed, and I just went on an island tour with them, and it was an amazing experience, but I couldn't have planned that, right? So plan less. Long story short, I ramble sometimes. Plan less.
Karen is saying, how we travel as a 3-week tourist is quite different from being in the same place for months at a time. And she's curious how your day-to-day pace changed from the beginning of your trip to the end of your trip as you got used to that living that way.
Oh my gosh, I don't think I ever adjusted. I don't think I ever acclimatized to packing my bag and moving every day. But that's okay, I'm going to connect this to my last answer. It's like, if you plan less, like, sometimes you'll get to a place and you're like, I'm really comfortable here. But if you've already booked your hostel 2 days down the road, you got to pack up and move. I think the pace, I really enjoyed being able to unpack my things, because I had like a backpack, like literally a backpack, and you kind of just pull your clothes out you need for the day. And it was really nice having like a dresser, and you can like unload some things. So I think that goes back to kind of that planning aspect, is just, if you're really feeling up somewhere, just if you want to take a break. But I think as the trip went on, I actually ended up coming home. So I moved my trip, moved my flight, moved it, and then actually moved it back, because I was craving stability. I was just craving just like staying in one place. Like, when you actually you lug your stuff around a country for a month, you just want to stay in one spot. So by the end of it, I think I got a little tired of it. That's what I was saying. I never really adjusted. But like, needless to say, it was amazing experience. Could not recommend it enough. Like, trying to just be resourceful and only bringing what you need. And that was a really cool part of it.
Great. And one last question I have here for the moment. Terry is interested to know what aspects of Thai culture really interested you.
Okay, that's actually okay. And that's a great question, because it's a huge thing I actually didn't think I'd get to today, but Buddhism really interested me. Learning about it, they have temples everywhere. We went to a bunch of temples, and learning about like that was a really good, reason, a reason why I would really recommend a group tour, because you have this tour guide who can tell you more about the culture and the background and the history of these temples you're at. So we like, I was blessed by a monk one day. I was like, we learned all about it, and learning about the Buddha and what different things mean within that culture. That was really intriguing. I didn't know, how much depth there was to. I knew it was obviously it's a whole it's Buddhism, but I had never really explored it. And I think it was really humbling to just listen and to hear this tour guide talk about these experiences and why this temple was built and where it came from. And I think that's a massive part of Thailand. And so that makes it, so you've got the islands, you've got the relaxation, you've got the nature, but then you've also got the culture, which is huge. I hope that answered your question.
Excellent. Quickly, is there any resources that you would say you use to plan your trip that you might recommend? Like, I mean, obviously people know about maybe some of the more broad ones, but were there any specific to Thailand that really you found really, really helpful, or maybe even YouTube channels that you found really helpful in planning out your trip?
Yeah, definitely. So, like we've talked about, it is all at our fingertips. Getting on YouTube and like, if it's not Thailand, just Googling specifically where you're going and specifically what it is you want information about. So I would Google, like, again, at the time I was really, I needed to follow the restrictions in Thailand. So I said like COVID or like, what is Thailand like right now? And, or even if you're going, I actually watched a video when I was looking at Europe on how to couch surf in Europe and what that's all about. So I think you can really search specifically of what you're looking for. In Thailand, there was someone I found called Ride with Gabi. So Ride with Gabi, if you're thinking Thailand. He posts really, what I liked about it was real-time updates. You're not watching a video from 2016 as to what the situation's like. You'd be like, okay, I'm in Phuket today, and he's walking around the island, and you can see what it's actually like. 6 or 7 days before you go. So I really liked that. And I can send these to you after if you want to also share with the recording. But another one is Tourism Thailand. It's just a website, has everything you need to know. I went on a group tour, and I actually am a brand partner with Tour Radar. So, Tour Radar is the kind of the site you'll go through, but True Travels is the group that I traveled with. It was an amazing experience. So that's also a group tour. So I spent a lot of time looking through those and what's involved with those. And for podcasts, I would say, travel podcasts are great, but anything motivational that'll help your mindset to get there, because it's a really big part of it is establishing that mindset to stay motivated and to really build up that courage to go. So anything, the Mindset Mentor is one I listen to a lot, just like finding this courage and independence, like we talked about. That's a big part of it. And I think that's a key element in this decision to do something like this. So, yeah.
And I don't remember, was there any visas you had to get in advance to go there, or were you able to just get it when you arrived? Or if there's anything?
Yeah, so I was able to use my Canadian visa, with TD, but.
Oh, I mean, in terms of passport, like immigration visas, like whether or not you need to get one in advance to go into the country, like an entry visa. But probably if you're not, I mean, if it doesn't click in your head, it probably either you didn't need one as a Canadian or it was just automatically issued when you arrived.
Exactly. So. Sorry, I'm racking my brain, so I'm trying to think. Like I said, the main thing I was thinking about was the COVID stuff. I had to get so many, like it was tests, and I was thinking if there was something I had to do around that. It was like vaccine passport. But there was actually no immigration visa I had to. Yeah. I think it is something you can do, but you don't need to do it.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, chances are if there was any, it sounds like it would have just automatically been issued to you when you arrived, and it would have been a tourist visa. So
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. And just because I see we're getting close to the end of our time, but I did want to touch on, because you talked about the incredible sort of F1 videographer story that you're going on there, and that sort of touches on, because you did say you met a lot of amazing people, influencers, digital nomads, executives that really sort of inspired you. And so tell us more about, it sounds like that was the highlight of that of those encounters there. Tell us a little bit more about that, sort of what what you, I guess, what you got out of that, some of your experience around that, and what you learned and what you've taken away after the fact as well.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like I said, these were two South Africans are from Cape Town, and I met them when they were filming for their brand called Hello Islands, if you want to check it out. And yeah, pretty big company over in South Africa. And what really inspired me was one of them was closer to like maybe closer to my age, like more so in his 30s. The other one had like a family with kids, and he was actually moving his family to Bali. So they had, this guy was a globalist, just for context. So he says like he doesn't believe in just staying in one spot. And one thing he told me that I'll never forget. I remember where we were sitting at, as one of those moments you'll just never forget. And he pulled up a map and he zoomed into Toronto and he said, "You were born here." He says, "What is telling you you have to stay here?" He said, like, you were born in this continent, or no, sorry, I'm butchering now. You were born here. What is telling you you have to stay in this continent? Like he's really like, his mind is just, he just travels everywhere and he's seen like most of the world, and he brings his family with him. So I thought that was really inspiring. Another two people I was on my tour with they were influencers. Their full income was through YouTube, and they were actually 21 or 22. So they were traveling the world basically for free because these brands were kind of paying them to travel around. So it's just like, what? Like your perspective and your lens and how you see the world shifts, and how you see how you can build an income and a life for yourself. So yeah, I'll stop there. I know we're close in time. Sorry.
No worries. And so I just wanted to check with Tracy. Do we have time for one more question, or?
Yes, I don't have any more from participants, but if you have a final question, I think we have a couple minutes.
Sure, for sure. I mean, just because, so I mean, obviously solo travel, there's so many advantages. We talk about it all the time on our blog and with other people that we go through. And I just curious, sort of what sort of advantages you feel that this solo travel experience has given you moving forward in your career, in terms of just, maybe just certain things that you've discovered along the way that you'll, as you, advance your career, as you continue to build it, things that you can leverage that you feel that you would have had if you didn't take this solo travel experience.
Definitely. So I think there's a few things. So first, just being, the confidence and how I carry myself on the day to day. I came back feeling like I know who I am. I know what I can bring to the table. When you can navigate a foreign country, it just feels a lot easier to apply for a job and to take on new challenges and roles. Like the problems just seem to become less of problems when I got back. Secondly, I think, I've always been a talkative, outgoing person, but solo traveling really pushes you in that way to like turn to the person and ask the question, or turn to the person at the coffee chat at the coffee shop. And it made me realize like saying hi to someone in real life isn't that scary. And usually they're wanting to be your friend, and it's really not a big deal. And this also goes a long way with career, is just like reaching out to people on LinkedIn, like reaching out for that job. And then lastly, I'd say it just says a lot about your character and who you are as a person if you can solo travel and take that leap. Is shows you're courageous, you're brave, you're able to solve problems easily. And I think this is a lot of things that employers and companies value and look for. So yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet, but those are the main things I could think of.
Amazing. No, I love that you mentioned that, because as many of the things that keep us from doing things is just fear of the unknown, or just fear of failure. And once you kind of get over that, once you do things that are kind of crazy and you realize, oh, everything was still okay, and I'm okay, and I can do this. And because I think sometimes we're not really raised, we're raised to avoid failure, and sometimes why not just embrace it a little bit? It might lead to some great things. And most solo travelers do end up discovering that along the way. And we do have usually a slightly higher tolerance for the unknown. So it keeps life interesting. But I see that we're just after 8 now. So I want to once again thank you so much, Bree, for joining us and for answering all our questions. And I know for sure you just have an absolutely amazing future ahead of you. And we can't wait to see it all unfold. And hopefully you remember us all when you're a YouTube star and traveling the world. So with that, thank you so much to everyone, all of our amazing solo traveler insiders as well, for joining us. And hope to see you guys in soon for our meetup in a couple of weeks, and also obviously next month for another of our speakers. And so with that, have a great evening wherever you are joining us from.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.